about the film and how it relates to access here in New Hampshire and in Northern New England in general. So we have Lucy Carl, who's our one of our board members for Planned Parenthood of Northern New England. She's also a local attorney and has been advocating for reproductive rights and health for the past 30 years, you said?
Oh, about 40.
40. And you're also a board member for Red River Theaters too, right? Great. And then we have Megan Gallagher, our CEO and president of Planned Parenthood of Northern New England. And Amanda Mahegan, who is our senior operations manager for Planned Parenthood Health Centers in New Hampshire and in Maine. So I wanted to just briefly have you all comment on the film and how it relates back to access through, I mean, we can talk about costs, we can talk about distance, and just kind of reflect on the film and the work that you all have done.
So I'm going to go first, and I'm going to talk about something totally different. And that's that we saw a preview about a same-sex couple fighting for essentially partners' rights. We saw a full-length feature film about a grandmother in a same-sex relationship. We got same-sex marriage with the U.S. Supreme Court this year, legal. In 1973, Roe v. Wade was passed, issued by the court, and abortion became legal throughout the United States. And every single day since January 22nd, 1973, people have been trying to take it away from us. I was a senior in high school. I started working in this movement by 75 because in 1976 the Hyde Amendment came out. And you saw everybody get up and leave because it's not an issue people are comfortable with. And we have to change the dynamic. What is going on with the attacks is awful. I do the judicial bypass work because here in New Hampshire we now have a requirement that you have to notify your parents. And if you don't feel you can notify your parents, you can go to court. And so I'm one of the volunteer attorneys. Every one of those girls that I have represented involves an adult. They involve their partners. It's often the partner's mom, or it's a grandmother, or it's an older sister. They want the support. But there was a great line by the mother in this. She was deeply disappointed in Sage. I have seen that time and again. I don't want to tell my mom, I don't want to tell my dad. They're going to be so disappointed in me. And the reality is there's nothing to be disappointed in. You know, these are choices, these are mature choices that young women make, that they're not ready to have a baby, to bring a child into this world, and that people keep telling us we're going to go to hell and we're murderers. It doesn't make it go away. So enough from my grandstanding, but I was just so amazed when I thought where we are historically between same-sex marriage and reproductive rights.
It is this movie's a wonderful confluence of the issues. And I think what I'm grateful for is that this movie exists. There was recent polling, of course there's been a lot of polling with recent events, and it came out just this week, a Bloomberg poll that surveyed Americans on their on what they think about the Roe v. Wade decision. And I was heartened by that poll because 67% of Americans believe that the Roe v. Wade decision was correct. And that is a significant number, particularly in comparison to other statistics we hear about support for abortion rights. Sometimes it's around 50%, sometimes it's around 55%. And I think what that polling reveals, and actually there was a segment on the media over the weekend on NPR this is the profound gray in this issue, and I think that that's what this movie was so powerfully revealed as well, is that it is, for many women, for some women, it is the right decision for them, and it is not conflicted at all. For other women, as we saw Sage go through, it is the right decision for her at this time in her life, but also there are these questions that plague her. And I think the bottom line is that we as a culture need to move to a place where those questions, where we don't plague women with those questions. And I think, step one is the last event that we had here to see, what was the name of that movie? Obvious Child.
Oh,
Yeah.
Obvious Child.
Okay. And we're here again, and that's so exciting that these are mainstream movies are addressing issues of abortion, because that's how I think we start to change the culture around abortion and women who choose to terminate pregnancies. I think that the story of access is a very real story, and I'll let Amanda speak to that because she works in the health centers and sees this every day. But I know that our call center that schedules appointments for all of our patients across our 21 health centers in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont has conversations with women in this situation every day, and I'm grateful that we can be there, going on this journey with them. This is just such a powerful way to tell this story, but I'm glad that we can be that resource for them in bringing the resources together so that they're not making decisions based on their ability to pay for a procedure or not. And I think that's a reality that I really want to bring home, that this is not a fictional story. This is a story that we hear every day.
Yeah, what I found really refreshing about this movie was just the unapologetic way that the grandmother spoke about abortion, and it was certainly part of her comfortable, word choices and subject matter, and you almost watch Sage cringe a little bit, and then as the film progressed, she became more and more comfortable, kind of owning that situation, and I think that the grandmother did a really nice job of kind of turning that around. There's the reality of this one unwanted pregnancy, and yes, she says, this is something you may think about in some way every day for the rest of your life, and then turned in a moment and said, okay, let's figure out a way to make this work. I also think that the journey that they went on from going from place to place is, as Megan said, it's very realistic. And we're very lucky in northern New England to have clinic access, within maybe a 2.5 to 3 hour drive from any place in northern New England, where someone can have access to abortion services. Other places in the country are not so lucky, where women may be going through, driving a day or more to have access to safe, legal abortion services. Not to mention the emotional hurdles and the fiscal hurdles. So I think that we're in a very lucky area, and I'm very proud to be part of those services.
I think one thing that was very nice that the film did was when they're at the clinic, they really emphasized that Sage had to go back and talk to the counselor herself, so they were sure that she wasn't being coerced. And I know that's something that we really emphasize. We want it to be the decision of the young woman who's making this choice, not forced by a partner or a parent or anyone else in her life, but it's her decision, her body, and something she doesn't need to live with. So I liked that aspect of it. I also thought it was interesting when Elle says, well, it used to be here, and Sage Googles it and says, Grandma, it closed, 5-10 years ago. And that too is what's going on. Clinics are closing. Access is much less than it used to be. We are fortunate here in northern New England, but if we were in South Dakota North Dakota, Texas, those drive times would be much, much greater. And it's not being taught in medical school. They really have to search out, medical students have to search out somebody who will give them training. It's just, access is really, it's financial and it's physical and it's providers.
So what did you all think?
Well, I just wanted to thank all three of you for what you do.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sorry, hi. I just wanted to thank all three of you for what you do. I work with Lauren at PPNNE. I just started here about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks. And this story that we just watched is basically my story, except for I didn't have an awesome grandma to help me out. I had to search and find the money. I was 3 weeks away from moving to college. And part of the movie that really struck with me was the fact, they ended up telling her mom. It's been 8 years and my parents still don't know. But I shared my story the other night to 150 people at our Pink Out event. And so, that plus this movie, I'm going to tell my parents, very shortly. Because I was ashamed of it. And I was, I could not tell them. As much as, I don't know what their reaction will be now, but then it was not an option. I was 18. And, it was, so this movie was very powerful for me. It was told in such a beautiful way. And I've experienced it personally and through work, how important lowering the stigma is about this. Because I spent years feeling ashamed of it and thinking that I did something wrong, wondering, what Sage wondered, if I was going to hell or, I'm not religious, but, something similar to that. And when people from high school found out through the grapevine, I was mortified. But now I will tell anybody who wants to hear it, and I shared it to 150 strangers. So it was a transformation that I went through, but it took me years to get there. So, women shouldn't have to go through that, and that's why I am so happy to be working here.
Thank you for bravely sharing your story,
Wow.
To us and to the other group. I mean, I think it's voices. We need to hear voices that sound like our own, that have had experiences like that we have had, to make our experiences and validate our experiences.
Right. It was an extremely empowering experience. So if there's anybody here who has or ever does go through, something similar to what happened in this movie, shout it out, because there are people in this room, people like us, people who have gone through this, that understand and will never ever judge you. And that's the most important thing. That's my 2 cents for it.
That's great, thank you.
I really appreciated I guess I'm looking for some of your opinions on how the grandmother went through the same situation with her partner earlier. And the fact that he was not aware, he was not involved, and having had children, I know how much of the process of pregnancy and birth is, for my partner and I, a very shared experience. And so I guess I'm just looking for your input, because I know that although it's 100% my body that's changing and my body that's going through this, that emotionally there are other people involved. And I guess I was just looking for what your opinions were and how that affected people's opinions of what happened.
I think in my personal experience and with people who I've helped through it, sharing it with someone who is actually in their lives, not just a JDAP attorney, but someone who is in their lives is very, very important. Whether the individual is able to share it with a partner depends on who the individual is and what the relationship is. I have found in is the partner is fully involved. And you know, even with some of the women who are younger and need to go through the judicial bypass, the partner is involved and supportive, and as I said earlier, often someone in one of their families is also involved in too. And that's important too, because it gives the young woman the support as they're going through asking those questions, and because it can be a very lonely time and a scary time. And I know with my own pregnancy, my own abortion, I was concerned later that I would be able to have children. You know, I ended up marrying the man and having 3 children with him, but I remember just thinking, you know, did I do something to harm myself so that I would be deprived of what is the seminal aspect of my life, which is being a mother. So I think all of us in this work, I think I can probably speak for all of us, we really encourage speaking with people you feel safe with, because it's a lonely journey otherwise.
I was a greeter in the Manchester office for several years, and I was always very pleased at the number, the percentage of partners who came in with their girlfriends in most instances. They were very young. What always made me laugh was that we, as you know, on the day the ABs were being done in Manchester, we had every protester who could get out of bed in the morning and stand outside and put up dreadful pictures. And the young men would get out of the car, drive into the area with their girlfriends, come into the parking lot. The protesters would start to make their comments, and the young men, testosterone just went sky high, and they would turn around and say, "You don't know what trouble she's going through, and I really am." And I'd say, "Just shut up, just be quiet, don't look at them." But the testosterone level was as much their own need as the girlfriends, but a great percentage of the girls came in with partners, which was great. Hopefully they continued to stay with them through the process, but they were there.
I think so often this becomes a family decision. You know, it's not, you know, in some cases it's individual, but often I'm seeing families coming in and doing options counseling together. Are we ready to have a child, or are we ready to have more children? You know, we already have 2 children at home, can we go through this again? I've seen some of the most beautiful interactions between partners, between mothers and daughters, between best friends, you know, as they're getting ready and preparing for this process, you know, of having an abortion, and then during the abortion, just some very heartfelt, genuine moments of just true support, which is something I find incredibly rewarding. And it's rare that people get peeks into people's lives on that level, to be able to see how these partners interact truly in a moment of like just, you know, something that's very intense, and can be life-changing for them. And not everyone is that lucky to have that, and that's where having our patient greeters advocating and helping women in and out of clinics, and having our healthcare associates, you know, with good sturdy hands and kind voices, helping to coach and keep these women strong through that time, is really a beautiful thing.
I know you guys are from Planned Parenthood, but I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody in the room about the Concord Women's Feminist Health Clinic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I actually go there for all of my womanly needs, and nothing makes me more happy than as I'm walking up the stairs, being harassed by everyone saying, "Are you having an abortion? Are you having an abortion?" And going, "No, actually I'm not. I love this place. I get all my stuff done here. This is a great resource." And they all get mad at me, and I love it.
Good for
That's
you for
wonderful.
speaking out to them.
Yeah.
Good for you.
My favorite fundraiser that I ever heard of was the Feminist Health Center in Greenland did sponsor a protester.
Yeah.
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 And depending on how many protesters came, you would more protesters that came, the more money
Yeah.
they earned.
Yeah, that's great.
And they're brutal. I mean, I couldn't imagine being, in that situation, being harassed in such a way. I mean, that's, like I said, it's my favorite thing when they harass me because I am strong and I'm feeling good right then. I have nothing to be afraid of. I'm not scared walking up the steps because I'm just getting an exam, And I just couldn't imagine being in that situation.
Yeah.
And being harassed.
I had I had both of my abortions at the Concord Feminist Women's Health Center, and both of mine were exceptionally amazing experiences. I'm sort of on the other end of the spectrum. I got gifts from my family, like you would get, for your birthday. And my boyfriend went with me for the first one, and there were protesters outside, and speaking to what you had said, he just said hello to them. He was just like, hi, walking up the steps. But I guess for me, I'm always thinking of I'm always thinking one step ahead. So now that abortion is, it's still legal and it's becoming more talked about and it's becoming more mainstream. I guess for me, I'm looking for it to become, I don't know if celebratory is the right word, but I remember this episode of Sex and the City where Samantha has an I'm not having a baby shower. And, there's cocktails and it's like, I'm not having a baby, everybody drink. And I guess for me, I come from a very liberal background. And like I said, both of my experiences were so positive that I want society to move even further in that direction. I loved the humor in this movie because if you're comfortable with this topic and the more comfortable society gets, why not joke about it? Why not, why not be able to add humor to it? Just like, you can add humor to anything that's traumatic and it makes it a little bit better. It makes it a little bit easier. And why not give gifts? I mean, why not? Seriously. It's a huge decision in somebody's life. You give gifts to somebody if they get an operation because, if they're in the hospital. For me, I think it's important because of my experiences to just keep moving forward. Keep making it better and better and easier to the point where it's nothing at all.
But this is the difference between the history of abortion rights and the history of gay marriage. A Supreme Court justice, who I will not name because I'm not authorized to use his name, made the comment in front of a group in a speaking position that if he had been on the court at the time of Roe v. Wade, he would have voted against it. Not because he didn't believe in the right of women to have a choice, but because it hadn't come through the system, it hadn't evolved. And he's not the only one. Jeffrey Tube and other people have used the same argument. Gay marriage, gay rights have bubbled up through the public opinion process in the United States. There was a demand for it that came evolutionarily, not for abortion. What Blackmun did was a top-down decision, and there wasn't the foundation that had been built in the United States at that point, culturally, socially, to demand that the court respond to it. Okay, the people want it, we have to address it, this is what's going to happen, and the support would have been broader. We're fighting that battle now that should have been fought over the years, and that's what makes it so hard. We're kind of having to do catch up at this point, and it makes it so hard for these people standing in front of us.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg shares that opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it every day. The cultural opposition to abortion is fierce, and I think that is our challenge. Joan, I think that's really well put. Is we, it's that as Justice Ginsburg says, Roe triggered a backlash, a 40-year backlash, and there's power in that backlash, and there will be power in the backlash against the recent attacks against Planned Parenthood as well, and there is that pendulum that is swinging, and we need to figure out, but we need to address those underlying cultural issues. And unfortunately, I think we have, in some ways, gotten more polarized over that 40-year time period. And so we need to figure out, even just demographically, as Americans cluster among people who think the same way that they do, it makes it more challenging to build those bridges. But somehow we need to, because I think that it's fundamentally about respecting women, and that's what we need to do.
I wanted to say too that I feel like in general we've been moving away from sort of these labels of pro-choice and pro-life, because we've seen labels affect folks in other communities of life and other cultural backgrounds, and I feel like even these terms used have had a hindrance on this issue, kind of like creating an us versus them feeling, but also not taking into consideration that everyone has their own choice, everyone has their own reason. Why are we trying to make labels and set labels? And I think they did a poll recently that said less people identified as pro-choice than people saying, yes, I agree that abortion should remain safe, legal. So more people identify with that concept versus the pro-choice label, which I feel like is really strong to hear, because, you walk up to anyone and ask them that question between the two, and you'll probably see that similar trend, because labels are kind of dividing us versus talking about the issue in whole and not talking about kind of people and where they fall within it.
I think I have a lot of difficulty because I'm not, I feel like it's very focused on black or white, agree, disagree.
Yep.
And I'm in neither of those. That's not where I am. Yeah, that's not where I can't be on one end or the other. And I think it's really hard because that's, like I said, it's this societal thing that either you are this or you're this. And it's either that you're pro-life or you're anti-life. And it just, I think it's really hard to be someone who has a gray opinion in general.
I think we're forced into that category. I mean, male, female, Republican, Democrat.
Yeah.
It's like
Labels
it's not that
everywhere.
easy. That's not how life is.
That's right.
I was told just a week ago that I could not be a Republican if I was here. If I believed that women had the right to be safe and be protected by other women. I don't believe the same way that everybody else believes about this. It's something I struggle with from the time I was 16, 17-year-olds, when I had girlfriends that were in trouble, right up to a grown woman, watching a woman that I worked with, a girlfriend, go through it. She has grown kids, marriages falling apart, and all of a sudden, you see these things happen, and you learn that you can't judge, until you're walking in someone else's moccasins. That's the old saying, that you can't judge it. And I guess what I want to know, I have my feelings, I live by my beliefs, I don't want anyone putting a label on them, but what I want to know is that my daughter, or my granddaughter, or any other girl in this country, whether she has a grandma to go to, whether she has absolutely no one to go to, that she has you to go to, that she can be. You can tell it's very emotional. It really is. I get caught between the liberal and the conservative so much of the time, but I do believe that it's our responsibility as women in this country to make sure that all women in this country are safe when they need to be, and that they're taken care of. And that's it.
Very well said.
Yeah.
I also personally think that some of my friends, I would label myself as pro-choice, and I loved hearing your story and just the different stories. But I think that some women struggle, like you were saying, being between a pro-choice or a pro-life, or maybe they wouldn't personally make the decision and they would choose to have a child and not to have an abortion, but that they would never stand in the way of another woman making that choice. And I think that maybe there could be an effort made to connect those women to the speak out and say, I don't, because it comes down to a very personal thing, but I don't think that has to get in the way of wanting other women to be able to make that choice if they needed to. And I think that's a very important, and I think maybe that's a demographic of women that struggle with the labels, or they just struggle with the aggressiveness on both sides.
That is a wonderful point. And I think in this moment, given all of the attention on the issue, we're really trying to elevate people's stories, and I think that's a really important spectrum of the story that needs to be told. Because, as you said, most, I think it's a third, if we were to use those surveys of the labels, a third pro-choice, a third pro-life, and a third in the middle. So, that is as common as any other position. And I think recognizing that is really important. Again, it's the complexity of the issue and respecting what the issue means to each individual person is what we're here to do. And I think that's what made the movie so beautiful, because it really drew that out in a number of different ways.
I don't like that the labels are like apples and oranges, pro-life, pro-choice. What is, like, life and choice? Those are two different things.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting.
You can want life and choice at the same time, but, come on.
Right.
Does anyone have anything else they want to say? We do need to, we need to, but if, wanted to give a moment for.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.